I am.
Okay, cool. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us this week. We are talking about transforming your organization into a network of teams. This week's guest is Rebecca Ellis. So she is a global change management and transformation leader with over 18 years of experience across a lot of different sectors. So Rebecca, thank you for taking this time to have this conversation.
You're welcome, Brian. Great to see you again.
Yeah, awesome. So Rebecca, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a transformation professional. So I like to work on macro changes, really big, messy
Yep.
changes that have a lot of impact to people. And so my specialty is in org design and org development, both the ODs, and really just looking at all that from a change management and change leadership lens.
Yeah. So Rebecca, let's get into it. This whole concept of, network of teams. I think it was out there a little bit, but I know Deloitte highlighted it in one of their recent trend surveys, and then it just became really, really, really popular. But like from your perspective, how did we evolve to this point? What macro trends are causing organizations to think about the way they're currently designed?
Yeah, I think the teams generally need a lot more agility than what a traditional structure, box and wire kind of chart
Yep.
allows people to have. And I think, a lot of large companies have just really complicated their matrix structure. And so I think that's one reason. So agility, just the globalization of a lot of companies that have required them to need to think about things more compartmentalized
Yep.
than so messy across all of these dotted lines, as we like to call them, in an
Yeah.
org chart. And just the pace of change is requiring us to need to pull different groups of people together, and completely reorging to do that is really disruptive.
It
And
is.
so these teams are much more maybe temporary
Yep.
solution that don't require that kind of disruption in who your official leader is.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. So as an this is cool because you have this org design superpower that a lot of people really don't possess. What's your perspective on spans and layers? Because like even that's the way a lot of organizations look at the effectiveness or efficiency of their orgs today. Is spans and layers still relevant? What are your thoughts on that?
I know there's a lot of rules of thumb around it. Honestly, I don't think it's a one size fit all kind of magic number of 3 to 5, or, whatever the latest kind of best advice on that might be. I
Yeah.
think it really depends on the organization and the problem that you're trying to solve. I think a lot of problems need to be solved a lot higher up in the corporate food chain than they are today. And so for that, I would say, it maybe needs to be a little bit flatter in
Yep.
terms of how this network of team would report. Um, but honestly, I don't get so much into the layers. I think it's really more about the decision rights. Who holds the decision rights, and where are people empowered to do the work, versus
Yeah.
how far down they are maybe in an actual org structure.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I love that. So let's get a little bit more concrete. How would you define, teams or network of teams
Yeah,
concept?
so to me, a network of teams is an official group that's been pulled together to solve a specific problem. And I think these things do have start and end times. I don't think when I talk about a network of team, I'm not thinking about a governance team or a leadership team that's kind of hanging together perpetually. But this is more of a focus group who's been given a specific mission and some metrics and end uh, to that. And I do think they are cross functional in
Yeah.
nature
Yeah.
and probably diagonal in reporting structure in terms of official titles. So you've got some more strategic, maybe closer to the strategy plan
Yeah.
senior folks, and maybe some great executors, people who are looking at for that stretch assignment
Yeah.
and getting in on a big visible project, something like what might be projected in a succession plan for a hypo or early career key talent type person. And so they're pulled together to work on this specific thing, which I think should be kind of officially chartered and fairly structured in what it is you're trying to solve, but fairly undefined in how you're solving it.
So, yeah, I love
So I see it more like a project team, like a task force, and not like something that's expected to live forever, keeping something alive that's kind of a status quo today. I
yeah,
think it's kind of like, I don't know, companies call them tiger teams. There's lots of different
yeah,
names for
yeah,
it,
yeah.
but that's how I see it, and the way I think about it.
In your experience, and I hope I don't catch you off guard, but in your experience, what type of problems would these teams typically go after?
So I think they would go after um, things that are causing the company to have to shift off center from a strategy perspective. So I think about today, a lot of companies are trying to learn how to be digital, whether that's a medical company that now has IoT based medical devices, or it's a car company who's now getting a lot more pressure from online, like Carvana or
Yeah,
online
yeah,
sales. Like, you can't hardly think of an industry and not think how they're being disrupted. Engines going electric, just like we said, connected homes, all of those things. So maybe it's a problem like that. Like, we've got to figure out how to innovate and be relevant for the next, generation of services or products that we'll deliver. Maybe it's we've got a cultural problem and we've got to figure out how to better empower or better hold people accountable. Maybe it's even something very specifically in the HR space, like we've got a shortage of leaders and we've got to figure out how to develop the next group of leaders, or how to get these folks ready now sooner.
yeah,
So to me, it's an effort to put together a network of teams. So I think it should be the kind of problem we're solving, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I agree. And I hate that I have to ask this question, but someone has to own the infrastructure around it. Who do you think is best fit to own kind of the infrastructure around it? Is it HR? Is it the transformation office, a PMO? Like, who do you think should own this network of teams?
So, as a career HR person, you'll probably find it surprising that I'm going to say not HR. I think there are certain situations where that could be appropriate. And I do think there are things that HR brings to the table around team effectiveness, how to
Yeah,
put together the right kind of team, how to leverage strengths, how to get the right mix of leaders to be more inclusive. But I think the business has to own it. Whoever's problem this is to solve, the person closest to that, they need to be the sponsor and the champion and the owner.
that's awesome.
Otherwise, I think the team could always be doing the proverbial kind of pushing a rope and trying to solve something in someone else's space that might not be as welcomed.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I love that answer. And then the other element is, what are some common mistakes that companies could make trying to implement this network of teams concept? What are some
Yeah,
things to
so
avoid?
there's been for years, you've read about it too and studied it, Brian, like this idea of self-managed teams and
Yeah,
just empowering people and letting them kind of figure out who's going to be the leader. I think that's a mistake. I think in these cases, it's ambiguous enough, usually, what you're trying to solve, that we don't want to have them having to fight out who's going to be the leader. And so I think that should be fairly well defined, and the roles and responsibilities in the team. If I feel like, I think even Gallup on their Q12 says, I know what's expected to me is like layer one, and
yeah,
otherwise people have trouble wrapping their head around how I'm making value here, what my worth is to this group. And so I think that it does need a leader, and I think we've generally kind of shied away from that at times, feeling like that might make a person feel less powerful if they're put on a team and there's already a prescribed leader. But I do think there should be a leader, and I think that leader should have a fair amount of authority over these folks, even though they don't report to them.
yeah,
And that's a different way of thinking, I think, than a lot of folks are used to. I've been on projects like that where my own leader, direct line, has failed to ask the person who's directing most of my work how I'm doing, and what I'm delivering, and yet done my performance review without any of that input. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So
Yeah.
this person needs to be empowered as if they direct the work and have the ability to provide real time, substantial feedback around how the person's doing. It should have a lot of weight on the performance metrics that any company would track at the time. I do think it frees up the actual leader, the solid line leader, not the team or network of team leader, to just be that coach then, right? Because
Yeah.
they aren't in the work, they're not directing it. They don't have to be the subject matter expert of what that person's working on. They just get to be the coach, which is really the most ideal leadership role, as many people have pointed out. So I do think that's kind of the most important dynamic is setting those things straight, kind of the govern how the team will work, and who's doing what.
Now, so you were talking about performance management, and that really I started thinking about implications, right? So like at first you have this problem that you're trying to solve, and you bring this cross-functional team together who can solve it. What if this becomes a new way of working within an organization? What are some implications that that's going to have to be considered? I think performance management, right? But what are some other areas that may need to be considered as network of teams becomes more of a prominent, method of work?
Yeah, so one of the first ones, this may sound silly, is facilities.
Facility.
Um, if this is a physical team, like has a physical office, I think they need to sit together. Now, if they're virtual, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But who we belong to or how we belong, the sense of belonging is important.
Yep.
And I think physical space and just the ability to collaborate informally is really important. If this is going to be your first team, kind of where your energy's going in that year, 6 months, 18 months, whatever it is. So I would co-locate them if it was a physical office environment to begin with. If it's virtual, not a big deal.
Do you think on that particular point,
Yeah.
do you think that it varies based on the time dedicated? So like if like sometimes you may put like a short team together for, hey, I want you to solve this problem, but I only want you to work on it like 10-15% of your time. Would that, in your mind, do they need to be relocated or?
Yeah, in my mind though, that almost doesn't make it a network of teams.
Got it.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking more dedicated, more full-time, like pouring it all in.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not your only, but it's your like where you're spending the majority of your time.
Gotcha.
Yes, I think it would. Yes, vary though if it was more project based in the thinking. And then I also think the comp has to be considered. Maybe you're not changing base pay. That would be just kind of unsettling. Your base pays this if you're on this or then that.
Mm-hmm.
But this team has to win and lose together. And if you're pulling people from all different parts of the organization and they're on different comp plans, different incentive structures, I think that could be challenging.
Yeah.
So maybe it's even a incentive on top of what those things are, but I think they have to win and lose together.
That's interesting.
Like in my current organization, if one business unit's had a healthier year end, those bonuses are higher than a different part of the organization. In this kind of environment, you wouldn't want a person just because they lived permanently in that space to get rewarded different than the other team if they're in it 100% on the same thing.
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. So Rebecca, my last question, let's say someone is watching this webcast or they're reading, the network of teams material and they want to get started. What would be like your recommended first step?
Yeah, so the first step would be to prioritize the right problems to solve. And so have alignment. I know. And I read the book Essentialism recently, and priority was never intended to be plural.
Really?
When we say priorities, like that breaks the even meaning of the word priority. But I think that's the first thing is like finding the right problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And then based on that, what are the skills and talents that would best serve this? And thinking rather unique, like, you know what, this problem has more generational impact. So we need our team to look very diverse generationally.
Yeah.
Or this this is a situation where we need all of our best tech experts because it's so digital, it's so tech heavy. Anyone not in that space would probably not feel like they could contribute as much.
Yeah.
So I think that has to drive the team makeup. And then I do think you should work very hard to find a diverse, inclusive, minded group, one that's willing to learn from failure
Yeah.
and accept that, not be so grounded in being perfect. And then, like I said, really flushing through your succession plans, your hypo list, all of the things that would help you surface kind of that awesome, maybe hidden talent that you've got in the organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Rebecca, thank you so much for just having this conversation and putting out all this great advice. I really appreciate it. I know that the community will too. So, thank you so much.
Awesome. You're welcome, Brian. I appreciate always an opportunity to chat with you.
Awesome.